Good morning. How's everyone? Sun is up. I checked and Bitcoin's running, so we're all good. We can drink our coffee and talk about the news. Hope everyone's having a good weekend. Hey, Huru. So, first story we're tracking this morning, thanks to Justin, is an update on the Van Gogh sunflower story. I didn't know this, but and it's still unconfirmed, but some people have done some sleuthing to figure out what went on exactly. And it turns out that, like Justin said, the glass was in front of the Van Gogh painting. Good morning, Justin. That the glass was in front of the Van Gogh painting, so it didn't really affect the painting at all. And it looks like there's a connection to the Get Off Oil, whatever the campaign was called, to the Getty family, which is a major oil political family in California. And Gavin Newsom and a bunch of these people are connected to that family. Nancy Pelosi. Most politicians, I think, in California have some form of connection to these Gettys. And the Gettys have been there since the very beginning of California. As I understand, they were part of the group that helped bring a lot of water to the area for agriculture, and as a result of their success in oil, and set up a lot of the political institutions in California, and have obviously a lot of understanding of the media. So it looks like maybe we have a situation where this was done on purpose, much like what Putin did as far as funding research that was anti-nuclear energy in Europe in order to ensure a marketplace for Russian oil for many years. And this has been proven, or at least investigated, to the point where we have enough proof from a French academic scholar, a very serious person who's come out and sort of laid this all on the table for most of Europe to consume. Not everyone's realized it yet, but what argument he made was that they had been subsidizing scientists in the same system of information laundering that we talk about on this show, which is, about $100,000 will buy you one of these experts, right? One of these doctors will come out and tell you basically what you need to hear. A bit about what we talked about, how Edward Bernays the other day, and that's why we bring it up, because this trick's been going on for a while. He created the American breakfast by inventing the doctor survey and the doctor reference for consumption. So he was the first person to say, well, I'm not going to convince anyone to eat bacon, but the pork manufacturers have hired me, so I've got to make sure we get more pork on the menu for breakfast. And these Americans are eating way too much, just a little simple roll and a cup of coffee for breakfast. We need more. We need the whole bit. So that's where this whole thing came up. And from then on, information laundering has taken this system where you go find a doctor, an expert, and pay him $100,000, and they'll produce the answer you want. Now, the whole trial against OxyContin in America and the producer of OxyContin ended up proving that. And that's why a $2.5 billion penalty came to the pharmaceutical company in this case, because what they had done was they invented a condition called breakthrough pain. It was just pain that lasted long enough to have a higher dosage of OxyContin, which was beyond the recommended dose that didn't create an addictive need. So they were literally saying, you have this long-term pain that requires a heavier dose of the morphine, the opiate. And the whole point of OxyContin in America was that it was engineered to not be addictive. And once they pushed through the potencies and everything, it obviously became addictive. And now America has just a tremendous problem with opioids and all that. Now, the fentanyl is not related to that necessarily, but it's still a worse issue than the OxyContin. The OxyContin just looks like a sort of a bridge, right? What a lot of people say about the cannabis industry a lot, that it's a sort of introductory drug, that it gets you going on the path, and OxyContin looks to be pretty similar. So anyway, we're tracking that story, but the important point of it is to know just how sophisticated the people playing the media game are. And that's a bit of what we're going to talk about today. The sophistication of these folks shouldn't be left up to your imagination, in the sense, well, that seems like it's too out of the way and too inconvenient, and it sounds like it would be really complicated to do that. Well, even look at this milk pouring thing in Europe right now, right? They're in all over the UK, they're pouring milk out in order to advocate for a plant-based diet. So do you think that this is 100% organic in the sense that it's just a bunch of people that are pouring out milk, and this whole system that we have, plant-based future is just volunteer, right? There's agricultural interests. Now, just like one of the important things we discussed yesterday with the sunflower story was more that the people conducting it just sounded like Greta. And I think that still holds, right? I think these people believe what they're doing, but it's like, how does the door get open? How did they get in? How do they do it, right? That's where you start to see the staging. Maybe. And it's the same with this plant milk pouring in the UK. These milk pours mean it, I bet, right? They really do mean it, but it's getting a ton of publicity. They're showing every one of these instances in media around the UK, and who knows, right? How do we know that the people doing this aren't subtly funded in the same way that this sunflower story was tracking? We don't even need to know the answer in the end, because the point is we have a media that just can't do its job, right? They jumped in 2 feet first with the sunflower seed. Thanks to Justin, we didn't spread too much fake news here. And anyway, the reason why we were interested in the story in the first place, as far as the reason I was interested in it, is because the people just sounded like Greta, and they were clearly following the model that Greta has created, the intonation, the speech patterns. Very normal behavior for teenagers to admire someone and then start to copy their behaviors. It's sort of the most natural thing teenagers do. Oh, by the way, guys, look at this is one of my fun, subtle Bitcoin t-shirts. It's the Toronto Baseball Club. And I bought it obviously because I love the BTC here. It's pretty fun. So wearing a little Bitcoin shirt today. So that's, one of the major issues here, right? That's one of the major issues, is that we don't understand what the media is doing, right? We can't really figure out rhyme or reason, and we have to look at the underlying motives of the people who are spinning the media in order to get what's going on. And there's a great example today of the failure of the media in America. So, of course, President Biden goes for ice cream. Did you know that ice cream is medically prescribed to people with dementia and Alzheimer's? Was anyone aware of that? The reason is it calms dementia, Alzheimer's patients down. They get really angry when they don't, when they know they're having a flare-up and they're having a sundowner moment. That's what they're called, a sundowner moment. Sundowner moments are when these folks just don't know where they are and they don't know what stage they're on and what city they're in. Those images you see sometimes of Biden being confused and not knowing where he is. Well, that's a sundowner moment. And sundowner moments are more or less hidden by the media these days. And whenever Biden goes for ice cream, no one really brings up what's going on. But we found out yesterday exactly what kind of ice cream he got from the Washington Post's own journalist, Tyler Pager. This guy follows him around, and he let us know. This was his only tweet, the only copy we have from the Washington Post yesterday. President Biden and his Baskin-Robbins ice cream. He ordered the double-dip chocolate chip in a waffle cone. All right, now this is happening at the same time that Biden has had a major diplomatic gaffe, right? Biden yesterday said that Pakistan was a dangerous place. Dangerous, he called it. He said it was dangerous for having nuclear bombs. And of course, people started asking questions. You have the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. I have 2 questions on this. On what info has the President of the United States reached his unwarranted conclusion on our nuclear capability when, having been Prime Minister, I know we have one of the most secure nuclear command and control systems. 2, unlike the US, which has been involved in wars. So what he's saying in here is that just being in a war puts your nuclear arsenal at risk, right? So a whole bunch of comments on this yesterday, and in the end, Pakistan has summoned its US ambassador back for calling the country dangerous. Majid Nawaz, who I started following Majid, he was one of the only Muslim voices in the world that defended Trump in his call in 2015, late 2015, December 2015, for a total and complete ban on Muslim immigration to America. If you remember, he had a press release, and this was, I think, around the time of the Bataclan in France. So tension was really tight. If you don't remember the Bataclan, it was a horrendous event. There was a magazine in France called Charlie Hebdo, and it had run an article, I think about, I can't remember, I think it was about a movie, and Mohammed was friends with a Jewish fella in the movie. I don't really remember the details, but anyway, someone went in, and unfortunately, to the Charlie Hebdo office, and they moved further. They attacked a concert, they attacked a soccer game. It was a whole mess. I had just honeymooned months earlier in that exact neighborhood in Paris. So it was a shock to me. My Wi-Fi was still remembering one of the pizzerias where they got everyone out front. And so this was one of the worst things that's ever happened in the world. And Trump came out afterwards and said, we will put a full ban on Muslim immigration until. So here's a typical Trump trick, right? So his conditions were actually really reasonable, right? I want a full Muslim ban until we talk about where the hate is coming from. So if you actually take the whole sentence, it's reasonable. The ban is only until you have a conversation. It's not till you resolve it. It's not till anything. And Maajid Nawaz was one of the only people in the world to understand the trick that Trump was playing here. Everyone else was like, oh, that. And it's still to this day, people say, oh, it was such a racist letter. If you go back and read the letter, it was literally, the condition was so small. It was a ban, which was fake. It was Trump doing his Trump thing and getting attention. But then the point of it was, why can't we talk about where the hate is coming from, right? It was literally just like, where's the hate coming from? Why can't we talk about it? And Maajid Nawaz was one of the only people in the world that said, this is not crazy. This is reasonable. And that's what brought him to my attention. Now, he was smart enough to understand the limitations of Trump. He was not a person who backed Trump. I think, like a lot of reasonable people, Trump has good and bad qualities, right? And the bad can be really bad. The good are great, right? The humor and all that. And even this thing that he did, it forced people to talk about it. Unfortunately, not enough people talked about it, but we talked about it. So Maajid Nawaz, who recently was on Joe Rogan a little while ago and had a really, he's one of the biggest anti-CBDCs people out there. He rang the bell early on CBDCs on Joe Rogan, right, about what CBDCs can do. So the central bank digital currencies. So Maajid Nawaz says, one of the countries is currently, so talking again about this is the nuclear snafu that we now have with Pakistan. So we even asked, I think it was Huru asked yesterday, who's left? India, that America hasn't estranged? Well, they didn't quite estrange India yesterday, but they found a way to get their neighbor. So here's what Maajid says. One of these countries is currently provoking nuclear war with Russia. Nuked to death 39% of people in Hiroshima and 32% of Nagasaki, invaded and occupied 2 nearby countries, funded proxy wars, and destabilized the Middle East. The other grows delicious mangoes. Now, Maajid is playing light with what problems Pakistan has, right? It's not just a country that grows pineapples or mangoes, but it's a weird situation where they're technically a major US ally, but I'd say they're one of the least trustworthy American allies. Nevertheless, I would say that there's still some instances where we can have confidence in them. The country itself has some troubles, Pakistan, major troubles. But for us to go and say those things translate necessarily into being dangerous when the US is, by its own choice, pushing a confrontation in Ukraine and Russia. So, people can go out and say, well, and this is something you heard a lot yesterday, right? Well, and this is people trying to defend Biden about the ice cream in Pakistan and all that. This is a quote from someone who's pretty in the bag for Biden in the media, saying, our president is a nice human being, nice and caring. He likes ice cream, talks to people. He doesn't shout nonsense and lies. He doesn't tell us to drink bleach. He isn't a racist. Maybe appreciate these facts. I know this makes you sad, but it's better now. Well, I wonder, when Trump would tweet mean things, did that affect my net worth? Did America's character in the world become questioned the way that they're suggesting here? Is it worse now? Is the world in a better shape or worse shape than it was? So you get a lot of people that will just be willfully blind on this stuff and will continue to just, talk about ice cream. And the problem then is that you just can't have conversations. When the media fails in this way, you end up being unable to have conversations that matter, and you end up having to watch shows like this, where I'm not an expert in, let's say, nuclear energy policies in Europe, but I've had to learn a lot because there's no place to go, right? And it's been like that for quite a while, right? It's been that way for quite a while. Now we're dealing with the economy and inflation and a major shift in economic conditions, and we have a media that can't handle the subject matter, whether it's intelligence or just willful blindness, right? There's a major problem, and we talk about that a lot on the show. One reason why I am for UBI is literally because we don't know what we're going to do with the journalists after we achieve hyper-Bitcoinization and a Bitcoin standard. In that world, there's no more place for corporate media in the way that we've seen it. And the people that have spent so much time lying, they can't go back on it. They can't ever be trusted again. So a lot of these people are just going to be totally incapable of adapting to the modern world. And we're going to have to find a way to take care of them. Even the liars, even the folks like Jim Acosta, right? Jim Acosta apparently getting fired from CNN. So CNN had a new leadership come in. They've gotten rid of a few people, right? They got rid of Brian Stelter, right? And then they took Don Lemon, who was a nighttime host, and Don Lemon, who can't tell the difference between a lie and the truth. He doesn't know what is news and what isn't news, right? This is a guy who's fallen for the Russia collusion hoax, the drinking bleach hoax, the Charlottesville hoax, any hoax that you can imagine in America, he just drinks it like, oh, that's true. So you got to imagine the new CEO comes in and controls CNN, and he's looking, he goes, how do I get rid of this guy, right? I know, I'm going to tell him I'm giving him a promotion. I'm going to give him a promotion from nighttime primetime host alone of your own show to morning with far fewer watchers, and you actually share the stage with multiple hosts. So you see Don Lemon in it when he had to leave the nighttime show on his last. Who asked what was the drinking bleach hoax? Oh, the drinking bleach hoax is one of the worst ones out there, and it's one of the ones that stuck in American minds more than any. And Jim Acosta pushed it, and CNN pushed it heavily. Trump during early COVID times was talking about all the therapeutic things we could do against COVID. And at one point, he had just been briefed on injecting light and other disinfectants into your lungs. And there is a tool that is like this light emitter, and it kills germs or whatever. I'm not sure, but it is about injecting these things basically into your lungs. And so he misspoke. He said inject the disinfectant, because they do. That's the word he must have heard from the doctors. They inject it. And even in the infomercial that I saw on this thing that was around the news just before he spoke about it. I mean, that's the thing. I had already heard about it just before he spoke about it. So it was about injecting light into lungs, which is a disinfectant. So they took that and they altered it to drinking bleach, right? They took it and altered it to drinking bleach. So that's where the drinking bleach hoax comes from. And that was one that was still, you'll still hear people everywhere say, oh, but he said drink bleach. Well, he never did. It's categorically false. It requires 10 seconds to go and watch the video to find out what he said, that it's an actual thing. You can inject disinfectants into lungs using light. Huru says, I remember that time. I was still glued and hypnotized by CNN and the likes back then. But I do remember that segment and him actually telling people to drink it. A lot of people heard it. Go and listen to it again. He never says it. Those words, drink bleach, never come out of his mouth. That's completely fabricated, right? Injecting a disinfectant into your lungs, true. It's an actual thing. People do it, right? Now, I don't expect him to get it right and be an actual salesman for medical procedures. He's not that kind of a salesman. But he was hyping up technology that he thought could work and then other people had hyped to him, and then you know how he is, he's just gonna hype it, right? So the drinking bleach hoax is one of the most obvious because it's the easiest to check. Charlottesville's really easy to check in on and debunk, right? It's so easy to check in on the Charlottesville. It's probably the most debunked scam hoax out there because so many people have said, no, that's not what he said. And it's so dangerous to America. I mean, that's the reason why, as much as I love Biden as a symbol for the dollar and what a great president he is for us Bitcoiners right now, it's perfect, right? The Alzheimer's thing is, right? Central casting couldn't have done better for us. It's awesome. But when he goes around going on and on and on about, he said it's the reason why he ran. The reason why he ran was the Charlottesville hoax. That's a major problem because it's a lie, right? Trump never said those things. And even now, when you go back and look at the Charlottesville thing, you can start to see a lot of the same signs that Justin brought up earlier with Getty funding the Stop Oil or Get Off Oil campaign and probably doing a publicity stunt, no proof, but maybe doing a publicity stunt against the Van Gogh. So it's the same kind of idea. There has been a whole group of, hired people that dress up, and I think they call it Patriot Front or something like that. It's a scam. It's actors, right? It's a scam. They go and they walk around with torches or whatever it is, this time flags, America first. They dress up like MAGA people, but they're all fit, they're all male, and they wear masks. Have you ever seen someone at any Trump rally, at any one of these things, wear a mask? It's impossible. It doesn't exist, right? They're the last people to wear masks. They're not going to wear a mask. You only wear the mask if you don't want. And we've got pictures of these people getting arrested, these groups of protesters. We've never found out their names before, right? After they get arrested and they disappear. So who knows, right? Who knows? But nevertheless, it's something that's happening a lot. Now, I don't have any proof of Charlottesville from those guys being hired. I just know what it looks like now in retrospect, because we didn't know about that at the time. It's become more commonplace to hire these actors and go out. I've seen it on my own shows in crypto and stuff like that, right? In Consensus in 2018, and I'm going to New York to interview Arthur Hayes this week, but in 2018, for our big show in Manhattan, Arthur paid actors to protest in New York City outside of our event that our event was taking bankers' jobs away. So they would have these signs that said, "You're taking all our jobs at this event, stop talking about crypto." And they brought signs. And, the media, being as brain dead as they are, covered it straight. They covered it straight, like as if it wasn't a lie. And they're like, oh, these bankers are protesting a crypto show. And I still honestly believe that's one of the reasons why Arthur had kind of a hit on him from the media, because he embarrassed them so much. I mean, he embarrassed them so much. That was a huge embarrassment to fall for that trick, right? So he was able to do it. So now Jim Acosta probably going to get fired. And Jim Acosta is a fella who wrote a book while he was president. He wrote a book called The Enemy of the People, A Dangerous Time to Tell the Truth in America. And this was all about how Trump had banned him from the press conference media hour or whatever, right? He said, you're not even a journalist. You're a wrestler. Get out of here. And so what, Arthur did it only to embarrass the media? No, I don't think, who was asking, so what, Arthur did it only to embarrass the media? No, I don't think so. I think Arthur is just like a Trump guy. He's trying to gather energy, get attention. I think he did it not to, I don't think he thought the media would fall for it so much. I don't think that was even the goal. I think that was an added benefit. I thought he just thought it would add a lightness to the event and it would be funny. And it did. It was hilarious. People were talking about it. Everyone thought I did it. So everyone was like, that's really clever, man. And I didn't do it, guys. Like, that's not what I did, I wish I'd have done it, but it wasn't me. A lot of people that day as it was happening said, Nolan, I couldn't even tell them it wasn't me. They believed so thoroughly that I had done it. But it was not me. It was a surprise, and it came and it happened, and I laughed like everybody else. So it was great. I missed one comment here from Huru. Huru says, wow, the segment I watched was broadcasted on Trevor Noah's show. Yes, I was really lost. It wouldn't surprise me now. I'll try and find the original then. Thanks. Yeah, I keep finding novel Trump alterations. It's mind-boggling. It is something else. It is something else. Yeah. So the drinking bleach thing, which is always used to laugh at his intelligence, even now it's a punchline. It's not true. He never said it. What he was talking about he poorly discussed a medical procedure that is only sort of, efficient and effective. Maybe it'll be better one day, but that's Trump's best attempt at, describing something that he'd been pitched. Right? That he was probably getting pitched therapeutics every single day at that time about COVID, and he remembered half of it and was able to describe sort of what he had been impressed by. I don't think he was ever, sure it would work. He was just trying to pump people up. Who says, and mind you that I live in Europe. So imagine what the media over here were saying. Well, I only really understood anti-Americanism when I lived in Europe. I didn't get it before. As a Canadian, we're naturally a little bit anti-American, but we're informed about America for the most part because it's our neighbor. And there is a weird groupthink in Canada, like a superiority complex that actually is projection and comes from a typical inferiority complex. So very similar to Belgians and French or New Zealanders and Australians. You're the little cousin or whatever, right? So you have this need to act better and stronger and all those things. And Canadians, had a lot of opinions about 9/11 and all that stuff. But when I went to Europe and heard their opinions firsthand and what they were saying, oh my God, like it turned me into the most pro-American person you'll ever find. Now I'm, I loved America as a kid growing up next to it and all that stuff. But moving to Europe made me like, I only want to defend America now from certain things. I don't mind changing the government and I want to do all those things. But just this idea that Americans are these dumb, fat, all the stereotypes you can imagine that Europeans have of them. And the way it's covered in mainstream media in Europe is insane to me. Right? It's insane, right? So it totally changed my perception of America being in France. Being in France, living in France made me much more pro-American, much more pro-American. And then I moved to Korea and Japan after I moved to France. And then that really solidified my pro-American point of view and changed me a lot. So, here's the problem. So Jim Acosta wrote that book, right? Dangerous Time to Tell the Truth in America. Meanwhile, like all he did was get banned from a little talk with the president, and he like lost his ability to gossip at the cool kids high school table about what the kid that nobody likes in his high school said, right? That was the big tragedy. Meanwhile, you've got Julian Assange, who is actually living life as a journalist where it is difficult and dangerous to tell the truth, right? So you got Jim Acosta, who's trying to wear the Julian Assange hat, but meanwhile, all that happened to him was he didn't get into the room with the free access to the president. And I believe even in the book, like one of the indictments is that Trump like cut the budget of what they get for free to eat at these things, or like he didn't give them as much stuff as he used to. And I predicted when Trump first took over that he would actually try to turn the dial down on the whole White House press thing. And I think he did. If you remember, he put this guy, Sean Spicer, in the job first, which in my mind was to just lower the energy of the whole thing because Trump was going to take the energy anyway, right? Trump was effectively the White House press correspondent because no one's voice would ever, resonate as loudly as his, right? No one else was as show-offy as President Trump, that's for sure. So not possible. But here's we've got, and Acosta was celebrated for this book. Like imagine calling a book Enemy of the People, which is what Trump calls the media in America all the time, enemy of the people. Imagine calling a book Enemy of the People when like because you got booed at events because you would go around telling things like the bleach hoax, right? That then people know it's a hoax. So big problem, right? Big problem. And meanwhile, the media covered it straight, right? They don't care that Assange is in jail and Acosta just didn't get nice donuts. They don't care, right? Meanwhile, There is a case to be made that they're the enemy of the people. In this instance, look at this. Russel Napier. If you don't know who Russel Napier is, he is one of the greatest economists in the world, I think, and one of the most realistic ones. So he's not the type of economist that's out there trying to show you that he is a mental gymnast and has all kinds of logical models and constructs that he can use to understand the world. He's just a Scottish guy who gets incentives and gets, that this is a machine, and if it runs, it's good, and if it doesn't run, big problems. So he's been telling us for a few years now that the entire economic system has already changed, and we didn't know. We didn't pick up on it. So he's coming out and talking about this, and his conclusion, I guess, is that central banks are already finished, and that government-backed credit has taken over the financial system, right? So here's his logic. He's talking about central banks here. He says they're impotent. This is a shift of power that cannot be underestimated. Our whole economic system of the past 40 years was built on the assumption that the growth of credit, and therefore broad money in the economy, was controlled through the level of interest rates, and that central banks controlled interest rates. But now when governments take control of private credit creation through the banking system, by guaranteeing loans, central banks are pushed out of their role, right? So what he's saying here is that once the credit creation goes to government guaranteed loans, the actual point of the central bank is gone. The role is finished. There's another way of looking at today's loud, hawkish rhetoric by central banks. Teddy Roosevelt once said, in terms of foreign policy, one should speak softly and carry a big stick. What does it tell you when central banks speak loudly? Perhaps that they're not carrying a big stick anymore. So here's his explanation of two things: what's triggered the process and what it's going to look like, right? So he says, my structural argument is that the power to control the creation of money has moved from central banks to governments. By issuing state guarantees on bank credit during the COVID crisis, governments have effectively taken over the levers to control the creation of money. Agreed. Of course, the pushback to my prediction was that this was only a temporary emergency measure. This was only a temporary emergency measure to combat the effects of the pandemic. But now we have another emergency with the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis that comes with it. So he's saying that governments can't retreat from these policies. And now this is what he says it will look like. So they directly interfere in the banking sector. They issue credit guarantees. They effectively take control of the creation of broad money and steer investment where they wanted to. Then the government would aim for a consistently high growth rate of money, but not too high. Again, history shows the pattern, and he starts talking about what things were like after World War II. Right? So he's comparing everything right now to after World War II, and he says, the UK had 5 big banks after World War II, and at the beginning of each year, the government would tell them by what percentage rate their balance sheet must grow. So all they're saying is, to each of these banks, you have this much money to lend this year, right? We heard Jamie Dimon the other day say we've got 1.3 trillion in cash. The issue now is with this reverse repo market, right? The reverse repo, just to remind you, the central bank takes cash or T-bills or whatever from the commercial banks, right? We've talked about it a lot on this show. In 2019, I did a whole media tour in New York City. I went on CNN, I went on Fox, I went on all the networks, and they laughed at us because Bitcoiners, we were publishing a lot of stuff at CoinDesk on this story. We thought the repo market, which hit $25 billion a day back then. So this is what's happening is the commercial banks are giving the central bank $25 billion every day. And the central bank pays interest on that. It's like a subsidy, right? They're paying the banks to do this, to park the cash. Now, we said at the time, how are they going to turn this off? How are they going to turn it off? Right? We just want to know. We predicted there would be another crisis and they would have to increase. We didn't know what it was. COVID came, right? But on schedule. COVID came on schedule. We didn't know it was a pandemic. We thought it would be something, some excuse, but here we are. We're in it, right? So the 25 billion in September 2019, 3 years ago, is now $2.5 trillion a day. And that's where the overnight rate comes from. And that's the thing that sets the entire rate system in our economy, right? It comes from that overnight rate. So What he's saying is to get more or less to get away from this reverse repo, what they're going to say to the banks is, here's your money, lend that for the year. That's all you got. This is how much maturity transformation you can participate in. Right? We're not going to subsidize you with the reverse repo. We're going to subsidize you by guaranteeing the loans you give out, and you can give out this much and your balance sheet will grow by this much in the year. Right? So totally different setup than the one we've known since World War II. Totally different setup, right? And it puts a far greater accent on determining where money will be spent. So this is where we get into all the trouble with environmentalism and the media not understanding they're being used, right? So let's look at what happened just yesterday in Germany. We talk about this guy quite a bit, Robert Habeck. He's the German minister, I think, of the economy. Now, he's part of a compromise. What happened when Merkel left, the Greens had some power and were given, as part of a coalition, certain authority within the German system and the German government. And he gave a speech last night, and the quote was, "Nuclear power and fossil fuels brought us here. They caused this crisis. They are not the solution." So coming out hard last night, fossil fuels maybe not, but nuclear power is not the solution, he says. Strong and at times emotional speech by Robert Habeck after weeks under pressure, defending his actions in government, but standing by green values. He got a standing ovation, of course, with that crowd. And in the end, that's why it becomes hard to even feel sorry for these Europeans. If they still have people, or the Germans in particular, if they still have people who are, maybe he believes it, or maybe he's part of the scam, right? It's hard to say with the religiousness of the green stuff. You got to give them all the benefit of the doubt that they're just ignorant religious people, right? You have to. But at a certain point, you have to say, well, I mean, you got to know that, and you can even read the comments here. Well, what do we do about nuclear waste? Nuclear waste was solved years ago. It was solved years ago. It's not a problem. Transporting it is a problem. Don't transport it. Dig the hole deep where you put your thing. Michael Schellenberger reminds us after this speech, 580 billion spent on nuclear. So they spent 580 billion on Merkel on all of these renewables, have generated enough energy. 580 billion spent on nuclear would have generated enough energy to replace all fossil fuels and biomass in its electricity sector and all of the petroleum it uses for cars and light trucks. So here again, we have a media incapable of talking about the economic issues, and obviously totally in the bag with governments making decisions on energy and where the money is spent and where basically capital formation is happening. And in America, of course, there's a larger and larger, no, that's wrong. The voice to bring ESG into American finance is actually getting lower and lower, I'm arguing, right? I think we might be able to destroy it. I think in America, we might be able to destroy it. Jamie Dimon the other day, clearly coming out on the side of rational allocation of capital and nothing to do with ESG things. So in America, you have the most famous banker, maybe, Jamie Dimon, saying ESG, no. You've got the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who has said it's a total scam, right? So you've got Elon Musk, scam. You've got the most successful banker, scam. Warren Buffett, but we can't cherry pick all of Warren Buffett's comments, right? But he's the most famous investor, right, in the world, I'd say. He's made improper, I would say, or even accurate, they can be. Rat poison squared for Bitcoin is true from a certain point of view if you accept that banks are rats. So maybe he's accurate on that too, but we can just say it wasn't the intention of what he was saying. So the most famous investor in the world says ESG, scam. The richest entrepreneur in the world says ESG is a scam. And the most successful banker in the world says ESG is a scam. So those three together might be enough for the ESG thing to collapse. My goal is to make it a joke, right? A joke. I'm trying very hard to program events like Bitcoin 2023 where we don't just argue against ESG. We don't argue against it. Like, no, you can't argue, oh, this much tonnage. And no. We're going to find a way to laugh at it. It's the only way forward, right? We got to use humor. We got to laugh. if we don't use humor to laugh at ESG and the moronic attitudes of people that support it, if we don't do that, we're in big trouble, right? We're not going to argue, and because we're not going to win an argument, right? No one's going to win. It's going to be the same thing, right? Just two people talking at the wall, and environmental arguments are the worst. They're the worst. It's two people trying to explain to the other what science is. You don't understand science. Both sides, both sides. You don't understand science. It's a bad look, right? It's a bad look for everyone. It immediately falls into talking points and a team sport, right? It's a team sport with points, and everyone just throws the points back and forth. It's nonsense, right? I refuse to argue global warming stuff at all anymore, right? I used to waste my time on that. You got to know, you don't understand science. Science is about being skeptical and right? Oh, but these are peer reviewed and they voted. It's a nonsense. It's complete nonsense. Don't do it. Don't waste your time on it, right? Just, it's not worth it. Like, it's not worth it. The only little sliver that might be worth arguing about is the catastrophism, basically, right? That's still fair game to argue about, right? Because you can actually go with the science, you can follow the science, and you can memorize the IPCC reports and those UN reports written by bureaucrats actually don't spell out catastrophism at all. So there's a way to be sort of compliant with the green world, basically just understand what the policy papers say. They don't say catastrophism, and just go with their own book, right? Read their own book back at them, and you should be fine, right? Just read their own book back at them. That's what I do. So there you go. But we do have to talk about just within that energy stuff for a second, and a little bit of slightly tied to the information laundering, Yeah, Huru says peer-reviewed equals paid-reviewed. Yeah. Justin says, the irony of Musk pointing to ESG being a scam while benefiting from carbon credits. Yeah, I mean, but look, Elon's, if you're playing the game and Elon is taking carbon credits, who's to blame the guy, right? As far as I can tell, Elon Musk is trying to get as many things into the future built before whatever vested interests can come in and concretize or crystallize and become too difficult to remove. So I kind of, I don't mind all of the kind of contradictions that lie inside of Musk. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Yeah, Justin says, don't hate the player, hate the game. Yeah, it's he is a complicated person, I would say, Musk, and it's natural for people like that to contradict themselves, right? And anyway, hypocrisy, as far as I can tell, hypocrisy doesn't change. We talk about it being a game and there's points. One of the worst things you can think as a point to try to persuade people is hypocrisy. It doesn't work. You can't ever persuade people. It won't work by calling out hypocrisy. It just doesn't work. Because we're all sort of hypocrites. I'm a hypocrite. Everyone can be a hypocrite, right? We all sort of subconsciously know we've done things we said we would never do. It's kind of a normal thing, right? And when I see, the reason I'm saying it doesn't work is because that happens all day. Like, how many times do we have to point out the jets going to the environmental conferences? How many times does that have to get pointed out? And we don't see any change in the score of the game, right? If that's how you want to put it. There's no change in the score of the game. It's the same game, right? It's the same amount of people say, jets, they don't care, right? So it just doesn't work to point out hypocrisy. I wish it did. It seems weird because it looks like it is persuasive, but it's not. It's just not a persuasive thing. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. In any of these, like, Bernays and all these people, the groupthink thing, right? The groupthink, understanding group psychology, they understood right away that part of the point of being in group psychology is to handle hypocrisy. Like, it's like a benefit of being in groupthink. And if you're able to be in groupthink, it's very easy to smooth over hypocrisy, and everybody does it. So that's why I don't think it has much persuasive force. And the people who know how to persuade know that. Right? They know that hypocrisy doesn't matter. So it's like a wasted shot every time. You're wasting your energy. it's rope-a-dope. It's Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman, where Foreman is just hitting him like this, and Muhammad Ali doesn't care. He's exhausted his energy, right? So if you think hypocrisy works, it doesn't work. It just doesn't. Wish it did. So going now to the media problems and information laundering and all this stuff. So there's an article today in The Economist, right? It's a comic book. This is The Economist bothers me more than any media, and it shouldn't. It's just so bad, and still enough of the, sort of midwits read it and treat it like it's a real thing and that they're informed on the world because they read The Economist. Right, so look at this article here. This is from Henry Hui Huao Huang. I don't know much about the fella. Right? I don't know much about the fella, but this is what he does. He's the founder and president, Center for China and Globalization, and he's an academic. Ranked the 64th global think tank, I guess, this thing, right? He's a Harvard and a Brookings Senior Fellow, or ex-Harvard and Brookings Senior Fellow. So here's the article that he wrote. Research cooperations pays dividends far beyond academia, Henry Wang writes. And what he's really talking about is the global flows of students and scholars and ideas that are no longer going between America and China. Because remember yesterday we talked a bit about the ban they put on engineers working in microchips, and that stuff since Trump has been going on in academia and a few professions, because a lot of people think that academia and getting postings and giving money was an attack vector for the Chinese Communist Party in America to do this information laundering thing we're talking about, right? To promote information laundering. And it looks like a lot of these academics have been expelled, or some have been expelled, but the numbers have gone down as far as what cooperation is. So he's here arguing that the stall in laboratory collaborations is worrisome, and it's a major problem to China, and all this kind of stuff. So The Economist is here saying, oh, poor China, more or less, oh, poor China, right? Poor China academia. Meanwhile, at the same time, we've got Reuters commenting on President Xi, who just finished his 10-year re-up as head of the Chinese party, looking like he's making a generational stab at being a huge leader, doing all kinds of things to promote militaristic pride in his people and pumping them up. Right now, Chinese people shouldn't be made to wallow in the failure of their last 200 years. I 100% agree with that. I personally do predict China will eventually become the greatest commercial market in the world. It will become one of the most important cultures in the world, but not under the Chinese party, right? Not under the Chinese Communist Party. They have another revolution to go, as far as I can tell, right? One more revolution to go before they take their natural place, not as a hegemonic power or anything like that, just as a great commercial market with a great culture that vibrates and sends its signal across the globe. It's a natural thing for China to achieve again, and I do think they're coming out of their 200-year-long arc here. I hope, anyway. I hope. But here's what Xi said yesterday. China's Xi says full control over Hong Kong achieved, determined on Taiwan. So you've got the Economist here running sort of a puff piece on it's sad there isn't enough collab. We need more collab in think tanks and researching and academia. Meanwhile, we know that China has been robbing America and other countries blind through these academic partnerships where they bring information back, and definitely been Gogh agents that have been sent over to bring this stuff. And we never asked ourselves, what's the price? What's the price of all of this stuff, right? The price in the end was Hong Kong. It was Hong Kong. And there's more. Is The Economist ever going to ask that, the FATF deal, right? Think about how China got control of Hong Kong. They infected the Parisian organization FATF according to a prescribed mandate, right? It was every 9 years, I guess, different countries take their turn at being the president of the Financial Action, whatever FATF stands for again. I can't remember the. It's the money laundering, terrorism financing provisions. So whatever that is. So China in 2019 again, right? 2019, very important year, 2019. Summer of 2019, FATF takes control. China takes control of FATF in their term. It's their one-year term. They produce a document, which is what FATF does, which says that the number one problem with Hong Kong is money laundering, and the number one problem with the money laundering is that the people cannot be extradited to mainland China to face repercussions. They face Hong Kong law, which means they get off. And that was the excuse used by the Hong Kong CEO, the Hong Kong governor, or whatever you want to call it, Carrie Lam, to say why they needed the Chinese extradition law, which caused the whole trouble in China, in Hong Kong, all of it, all the protests, all the pepes, all the stuff you saw in 2019 in Hong Kong came from FATF, the same enemy of Bitcoin, because it's them who makes the travel rule. It's them who have tried to force Bitcoin to adhere to OFAC compliance and all these other regulatory models that doesn't really fit in Bitcoin, right? It's not a thing that the network really even understands. So here you have Carrie Lam using the enemy of Bitcoin to help China take Hong Kong. And you've got the news, The Economist, who is promoting more or less the same thing, more of the same, more capture by Chinese interests of think tanks and groups and organizations. And what we've already paid for in that is one of the most important jurisdictions legally in the world for money, for laws, for freedom, right? The Wild West that was Hong Kong is gone. And, you know, all the forces of liberty and freedom lost a lot without Hong Kong. You know, I used to get one of the most, you know, the feeling you get when you're in New York City or one of these really great, energetic cities. Hong Kong had that like no other. And if you go there now, it's just a dead shithole. It's just a boring town in China. It's nothing like it was. Now, I haven't been because I can't go anymore. The last time I was in China, there were spies all over us, and I don't want anything to do with going there anymore. And that was already in 2016. Right? I'm fine staying in Korea and Japan and Singapore and these places, but Hong Kong changed a lot. So there you go. All right, we didn't talk about the greatest story of the day. We've got to talk a bit about it. The show's gone a bit long today. Kanye. So Kanye. Well, how do we talk about it? So he gave a bit of his explanation for what he meant about the DEFCON 3, and you know, I buy it. He's talking about warning, and if you add the whole context together, right? His point, I think, was to get canceled, and by getting canceled at an extreme level, right, bringing up Jewish stuff and all that, you basically can't cancel him more than he's been canceled, right? He can't be canceled more. And now, I guess from what we saw yesterday, he is free. He did an interview on Drink Champs. So what I'll say first about the interview, I suspected when he wrote that original tweet to Puff Daddy or P. Diddy or whoever he wrote the first thing to about DEFCON 3, sounded drunk, frankly, right? Sounded drunk. And what I saw yesterday was a little drinking. I'm not sure if he was drunk. I didn't get to see the whole interview yet. I did share the interview. I've seen clips. I saw a bit of, you know, a little bit of aggression, which I think is normal. But what Cernovich says and what a few folks say is, I think, accurate, right? So, well, first of all, what he said on the show was incredible, right? So he said that George Floyd passed away from fentanyl. Nothing to do with the violence of the police officer. He explained about finance and he explained about the media a little bit. But I think Cernovich's line is the right way to take it. And that's how I'm interpreting it. So Mike Cernovich says, Ye's life trajectory forever changed. What that means or looks like, no one knows. But this is a clear fork in the road, a new path taken. And I think that's right. I think that what he did yesterday in the context of what's going on in his life is like this. Now, where do we all go? I say we continue to promote the Kanye West Bitcoin policy plan. And I think it will work given the way he's positioned himself now. I think he can make a legitimate run. I think the way he explained this gives an option to go in that direction. Now, I could be wrong, but the more and more I hear him speak, the more and more I'm certain that we got to do a Bitcoin event on Jekyll Island, where the US dollar and Federal Reserve were created. And we got to talk about Bitcoin, and we've got to get much better vibes around our financial system from that one event. And the way I hear him speaking with his 2024 hat says he would be a great keynote for our event. We've got other Bitcoin policies for him, but if he's willing to go this hard in the direction that he looks like he's going in, we got a chance. And I said the same thing when Trump first came out in 2015. When Trump first came out in 2015, I was my last 2 weeks basically, because we were waiting to publish my Bitcoin report that I had written and that I'd spent a lot of time on and all that stuff. So we were about to file it in the Senate of Canada while we used op-return script to hash it into Bitcoin's blockchain. So you can always go find it there. So we did that, and I was still hanging out with all these senators, and I was having a bit of a fight with the parking people around our parliament buildings, the police. Now, my fight with them was sort of just a stupid, boring thing, personal thing, just always fighting. They're trying to give me tickets and da-da-da. So I had to go move my car, right? So just by chance, I had to go move my car one day, and I turned the radio on as I turned my car on. And they had Trump's announcement. It was playing live, the Mexican rapist speech, the Mexican rapist speech. And I heard it and I said, oh my God, like this, he can win. This is the most amazing thing I've ever heard in my life. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard in my life, because I came from a failed populist-ish revolution in Canada where we had spent years trying to get control of Parliament, got it, and then were more or less backstabbed by the Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper, who, we did a lot to get a majority government where we could sort of enact, we were going to get rid of the public broadcaster. We were going to get rid of all kinds of things, right? Really much more populist type of stuff. And nothing in the populism has changed since then, but it was like free up these markets, free up those markets, get rid of budgets that, get rid of bureaucracy, all that kind of stuff. But he basically wouldn't do it. He was too afraid of the fight. We'd already been through fights for years with the media to win, finally won, and then they didn't want to do anything. And this was a big deception to a lot of people, because we thought we were even being sort of vanilla about stuff in order to get a majority where we could actually change the laws, right? And become a populist situation. And he just abandoned us. He just went with continuing to try to get good media coverage so that he could get another term. So obviously all of us were furious, and folks like me found ourselves in Bitcoin right away, because we're like, this, you can't even change the system from inside. We had the numbers inside around the Prime Minister. It should have been simple. It should have been simple to affect big change. We had like the Rob Ford situation going on in Canada at the time, right? We should have been able to, but it didn't work out. And so we were already, we knew the problem of a leader that was unwilling to say what he meant, to not confront the media directly, right? To not confront them directly. And then Trump did it, and I said, this is what we need, right? This is the only thing that will work right now, is to confront the media this way. And that was where my insight to Trump being a winner came from. And when we look now, right, and people said, the senators in the room with me that time all said, well, it's just a publicity stunt. If he's serious, he could win, right? They weren't scandalized by what he was saying. These people knew the game and knew what was going on. All they said was, if he's serious, he can win. And it's a bit of the same situation with Kanye, right? He's taken a fork in the road now. He had to. I don't think you can go, just like the leader that I worked for, Harper. Drink champs. Yeah, on Drink Champs. talking about? I'm trying to find it. One was pulled from the show. No, it's Drink Champs. Yeah. 2 words, Drink Champs. Yeah. They might have pulled it. I caught a bunch of it this morning, really early. Not all of it because it was a little too long. Once again, my only worry is he seemed a little drunk in the interview. He seemed a little. Whoops. I don't know if he was. I didn't catch the drinking, but it sounds like they drink on the show, and you can recognize that. Yeah, 40 minutes long should be it. Yeah, you can recognize drinking behavior, right? I don't really drink. Not that into it, but I know what it looks like when someone is drinking, and it looked like it. So whether or not he meant to say those things or whatever, he's making a choice. And just like Trump had to make a choice right away in 2015, right? He had to go extreme, what was called crazy at the time, right? I saw it as like just there'll never be a better show than Trump the candidate. Trump the candidate. And if people don't understand why people like myself love Donald Trump, right? Now, don't want him as president again, so disappointed in his last day in office. We'll probably never forgive him for that. I haven't heard a really good excuse yet for why no Assange, Snowden, Ross pardons, but it's unforgivable as far as I'm concerned. I can't personally forgive him for that. As much as I think he's hilarious and was a great time and all that. But the reason why we think he's so great is because when he knocked out Jeb Bush, when he knocked out the neocons, people like me that were trying to effect change inside of conservatism, populism, whatever you want to call it, knew these were the biggest obstacles. And to watch his skill removing these people, like the knockout punch of low energy Jeb Bush, was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. I called it immediately. He's out. That's done. It's done. All of it's done. The Bush family, done. Finished. One punch. Bam. And that's what you're talking about here. This is talent. Like, this is another level of talent, right? We didn't attract enough talented people in politics in America for so long, but this was the first time we saw a talented person take a punch at a low energy, untalented career politician. And it was Glass Joe. I mean, down on the ground, right? Low energy. Yeah, you're a real tough guy. I mean, hilarious stuff. Hilarious. But that's what it required. It sounded crazy to many people. I remember I went on my honeymoon. I mentioned it already on this show. I went on my honeymoon that summer to France. We were in Paris and Corsica. And so the summer of 2015, I spent most of the summer in France. And when I deliberately, no politics, didn't watch anything. Just Bitcoin stuff. And this was like, I'd quit I remember still on my honeymoon in Corsica when I had quit my job, looking out at the sunrise saying, basically I give my whole career and life to Bitcoin from that moment on. I still remember the moment like it was yesterday. And even though I had already quit my job and was going in Bitcoin, I still hadn't dawned on me the choices that I was making, right? So I went full Bitcoin, mentally, everything at that moment. I became a complete and total Bitcoiner. So when I came back to Canada, everyone was, Trump imploded. It was a disaster. He's never going to win. And I took 10 seconds and I looked, I said, this is all gold. Like, he didn't lose. This is amazing. Like, this is hilarious. And he chose his path. He made a choice. There was a fork in the road for Trump when he came down that escalator and he gave the Mexican racist speech. And remember, Trump was a black icon before. Don't forget that. He was an icon of the African-American population, right? He was in rap videos. He was all kinds of stuff. They made him a racist that summer. They turned that switch, right? Nice. Looking for this Drink Champ interview. I've never seen. I got my entertainment for the night. Yeah, it's pretty good, Uru. It's pretty good. So there you go. Trump, Kanye, just like Trump, has made a choice, and we'll see where it goes. But I think it's good for Bitcoin. I really do, because what we can do here is push our Bitcoin policy on Kanye. And I do think the party piece at Jekyll Island is going to work. I've been saying it for a year. I think we're going to do the greatest Bitcoin show in the history of the world on Jekyll Island. And Kanye is our keynote. He is the keynote of that show. And we're going to talk about stuff. And we're going to have all kinds of Jewish people there. Because remember, what Kanye said right? What he said was not really an attack. He never attacked anyone. He said he was going to say stuff, but as he says in the interview, DEFCON is like how to protect yourself, right? How to protect yourself. It's a defensive measure. And remember, he talked about censorship at the same time. And in the meantime, he's been censored. So did everyone walk into a trap? Was this a Trump-like trap? Maybe. It might have been. It might have been. Anyway, we got to keep watching Kanye. You know, the alcohol thing worries me, right? I don't want a substance abuser anywhere. I don't know what's going on. I know he called Pete Davidson a heroin addict in the interview. It was pretty good stuff, maybe. All right. That's about it for today, guys. Went a little long, huh? All right. I don't think I have any more headlines, though. Thanks for sticking around, everyone. I appreciate it. See you again real soon. See you tomorrow. I'm heading to New York tomorrow, but I'll be around in the morning.